I never imagined the night before my wedding would become the moment everything unraveled. I was supposed to be on the verge of the happiest day of my life, marrying the woman I'd loved for years, surrounded by friends and family, celebrating a union I had believed was built on respect and trust. Instead, I found myself walking away from it all, not out of hesitation, but out of conviction. My name is Andrew. I'm 33, and up until recently, I was engaged to a woman named Vanessa, a woman I once saw as my future, my home, and my safe place. We met 6 years ago at a summer BBQ in Austin, hosted by a mutual friend from college. I still remember the first time I saw her sunlight dancing through her auburn curls, a mischievous grin on her face as she playfully roasted someone's choice of sandals. She had this ability to command a room without trying, and her laughter had a way of making you want to laugh with her, even when you didn't get the joke. We struck up a conversation over grilled corn and chilled beer, and just like that, something clicked. Our connection was instant, like finding a missing puzzle piece without even realizing one was gone. Over the years, that bond deepened. We supported each other through job transitions, family emergencies, and cross-country moves. She stood by me when I lost my mother to breast cancer 2 years ago, a loss that shook me to my core. At least I thought she stood by me. Back then, I had no reason to doubt her sincerity. When I proposed to Vanessa on a snowy evening in New York's Central Park last winter, I had zero doubt in my heart. I got down on one knee under the twinkling glow of holiday lights and asked her to be mine forever. She cried. I cried. Strangers clapped. It felt perfect. In my heart, I wasn't just choosing her, I was embracing her entire family. That meant her parents, Clark and Elaine, who were prominent local business owners and very much the type who liked to remind people of that fact. They were loud, brash, and constantly dropping funny quips that often landed more like jabs. I used to laugh those comments off. I told myself they were just eccentric East Coast energy, as Vanessa called it. But over time, I noticed something deeper beneath their theatrical flair entitlement, subtle condescension, and a disturbing lack of gratitude for things that truly mattered. But I didn't know that yet, not fully. At the time, I was blissfully unaware of just how far their arrogance could go. I was still planning rehearsal speeches, finalizing tux fittings, and dreaming of our honeymoon in Lake Tahoe. I had no idea that the night we gathered to toast our union would instead become the stage for the most humiliating moment of my life and the most important decision I would ever make. To understand why what happened at the rehearsal dinner hurt so deeply, you need to know about two families, mine and Vanessa's. More specifically, about two women, my late mother, Evelyn, and my would-be mother-in-law, Elaine. Evelyn was everything I aspired to be: graceful, sharp, selfless, and deeply kind. She worked as a high school counselor in Raleigh, North Carolina, and spent over 2 decades helping teenagers find their footing in a confusing world. She had an open-door policy for everyone: students, neighbors, even strangers. She made people feel safe, seen, and worthy. And she didn't just help with words, she acted. When she passed away after a 3-year battle with cancer, she left behind a community that still grieves her absence. But her generosity extended far beyond her job. When Vanessa and I started dating seriously, my mom welcomed her and her family with open arms. Even though she was already undergoing treatment, she made time to help Clark and Elaine when their artisanal bakery in Brooklyn ran into serious trouble. The shop was hemorrhaging money, and their investor had just pulled out. Vanessa was panicked, unsure what the future held for her parents, and I remember sitting at our small kitchen table, watching my mom pull out a folder full of financial documents. "I know it's not ideal," she had said, "but if I co-sign this line of credit, it'll keep their doors open long enough to recover." She didn't do it for glory. She didn't even tell many people about it. She believed in second chances and giving people a shot, even when it cost her something. That loan, $85,000, kept the bakery alive. Later, when their walk-in freezer broke down during a July heat wave, my mom wrote a personal check to replace it. Not because she had money to throw away, God knows her medical bills were stacking up, but because she didn't want Vanessa's family to lose everything. There was more. When Vanessa's older brother Jeremy got dropped from his final semester at Columbia due to unpaid tuition, Evelyn stepped in again. She quietly transferred the funds to his account, ensuring he could graduate with his class. She never once asked for recognition, never once mentioned the strain. She just kept giving. She even helped them restructure their accounts, walked Elaine through bookkeeping software, and babysat Jeremy's twin daughters while he studied for the bar exam. If you asked her why, she'd smile and say helping people is never a bad investment. But what stung the most wasn't just that they never truly thanked her. It was that over time they began rewriting history. Clark acted like the bakery's success was purely from grit and hustle. Elaine rolled her eyes at my mom's suggestions like she had never once relied on her. And Vanessa, she started acting as if my mom's kindness was an obligation, not a choice, a favor owed rather than given. Evelyn didn't need their applause, but I guess in hindsight I did. Looking back now, I can't believe how many signs I overlooked, tiny cracks in what I thought was a solid foundation. They weren't loud or dramatic, just subtle ripples that I convinced myself were normal bumps on the road to marriage. I see them clearly now, but back then I was so wrapped up in the future I envisioned with Vanessa that I failed to examine the present with clarity. It started with little comments. Vanessa would occasionally say things like, "Your mom means well, but she can be a bit much." Or "Evelyn always has to insert herself into things, doesn't she?" At first I laughed them off. I told myself it was just her adjusting to being part of a new family, that she didn't mean anything by it. After all, they had very different upbringings. Vanessa came from a world of champagne brunches and designer kitchen appliances. I grew up in a modest blue-collar household where generosity wasn't about show, but about survival. Still, the comments didn't stop. When I suggested having a small photo of my mom at the ceremony, just a quiet tribute, Vanessa looked at me like I'd asked to turn the reception into a memorial service. "Isn't that kind of heavy for a wedding?" she said, tilting her head. "People are supposed to feel joy, not grief." That stung. I tried to explain it wasn't about grief, it was about honoring the person who shaped me. But she waved it off like I was being over-emotional. I let it go. Then came the passive jabs from her parents. Clark loved to make jokes about how Vanessa was trading down to marry someone simple. He once laughed at my hometown in North Carolina, calling it a place where dreams go to die. Elaine had this way of cloaking her insults in sweetness. "Vanessa always did have such a nurturing heart," she said once while looking straight at me. She's always been good at helping people reach their potential. I knew what she meant. They saw me as a project, a fixer-upper who was lucky to be welcomed into their curated lives. I felt it every time we had dinner at their townhouse in Manhattan, where conversation was less about connecting and more about flexing status. Still, I bit my tongue. I convinced myself that after the wedding things would settle, that maybe they'd see me differently once I was officially family. But what I didn't realize then was that they never intended to accept me. I wasn't one of them, and I never would be, not because of my background, but because I came from humility, not hubris. I viewed family as sacred, not strategic. They didn't want a son-in-law, they wanted a prop. Vanessa never stood up for me. When her parents made those comments, she'd either laugh along or change the subject. I told myself she was just trying to keep the peace. But now I see it for what it was: complicity. The silence of someone who chose comfort over courage. And I, like a fool, chose to see loyalty where there was only avoidance. Roughly a month before the big day, Vanessa's parents offered to host the rehearsal dinner at a high-end restaurant in downtown Boston that Elaine's cousin partially owned. On the surface, it sounded like a generous gesture. Vanessa seemed pleased, and I thought naively that maybe Clark and Elaine were finally trying to meet me halfway. I even told myself maybe they're turning a corner. I should have known better. From the very beginning, their so-called generosity came with a spotlight. Elaine would mention the dinner in almost every conversation. "We're sparing no expense," she'd say, or "it's going to be the event of the season." Clark wasn't far behind, bragging about how he pulled strings to get a Saturday night reservation, how the executive chef was one of the best on the East Coast, and how fortunate I should feel to be part of something so classy. It quickly became clear that the dinner wasn't for us, it was for them. Every detail, from the custom-printed menus to the imported floral arrangements, screamed spectacle. I tried to participate in the planning process, but Elaine always brushed me off with a condescending smile. "Don't worry, Andrew. We've done this before. Just enjoy yourself." Even the guest list became a point of contention. I asked if I could confirm the seating plan and was met with an exaggerated eye roll. "Sweetheart," Elaine said, "you only need to show up and smile. Leave the logistics to the professionals." Logistics. Like my family and friends were checkboxes on a spreadsheet instead of people who'd raised me, stood by me, and were flying in from out of state to be part of this moment. Then came the food. Elaine raved about curated flavors and how the menu was elevated beyond anything Andrew's probably used to. She actually said that to my face, like I grew up eating gas station sandwiches and wouldn't know a good meal if it bit me. Clark chimed in with, "He'll be fine as long as there's beer, right?" The digs never stopped, and every time I looked at Vanessa hoping for a flicker of discomfort or defense, I got nothing. Just silence, or worse, a half smile like she found it all mildly amusing. Any attempt I made to express concern was dismissed with, "You're overthinking," or "My parents know what they're doing." That was the problem. They knew exactly what they were doing. They were turning a moment that was supposed to unite families into a performance designed to show off their wealth, their influence, and their control. The more I tried to insert myself into the process, the more I realized I wasn't part of it. I was a bystander in my own celebration. By the time the dinner rolled around, it no longer felt like a prelude to marriage. It felt like a warning. The night of the rehearsal dinner arrived with all the tension of a courtroom trial. Vanessa and I rode to the restaurant in silence. I tried to make conversation something light, maybe even playful, but she was glued to her phone, occasionally tossing out half-hearted responses like, "It's just dinner, Andrew. Don't stress." Just dinner. That's what she called a night that was supposed to be a celebration of our future. When we stepped inside the venue, I felt like I'd walked into someone else's gala. Gleaming crystal chandeliers bathed the room in golden light. Uniformed servers zipped between tables dressed in pristine linens. Every inch of the space oozed affluence and artificiality. At the entrance, Clark was shaking hands like a politician on election night, while Elaine barked orders to the staff as though she owned the place. They looked less like proud parents and more like theater directors prepping for opening night. It only got worse when I looked around. Of the 50 or so guests, only 4 were from my side: my father, my sister, and 2 childhood friends. The rest were Vanessa's extended family and Clark's business contacts. It didn't feel like our event. It felt like I'd been invited to someone else's marketing pitch. I pulled Vanessa aside. "Where's the rest of my family?" I asked quietly. She sighed. "Andrew, your side's small. My parents had to fill the room somehow." It wasn't just a dismissive response, it was a deliberate erasure. I bit down my frustration and returned to the table, determined to get through the evening. Then the speeches began. Clark was first. He sauntered to the mic with the confidence of a keynote speaker at a luxury conference. Tonight, he began, we celebrate not just 2 individuals, but 2 families merging together, our brilliant daughter, Vanessa. And of course, Andrew. The pause before my name wasn't lost on anyone. It came out flat, like a concession in a game he didn't want to play. Then came the backhanded compliments. Vanessa had always been driven, ambitious, a high achiever. And now Clark added with a smirk, she's chosen someone to keep her grounded. A few polite chuckles rippled through the room. I didn't laugh. My hands curled under the table, fists tightening, as Clark recounted stories of Vanessa's childhood, how she always aimed high and luckily had guidance to stay on course. Then came the line that hit like a slap. "We didn't envision this exact match at first, but life's full of surprises, isn't it?" Next came Elaine. She strode to the microphone like she'd won an award and launched into a monologue about Vanessa's grace, patience, and strength. And me, I was the project she'd nurtured. "Vanessa's taught Andrew so much," Elaine cooed. "He's really come a long way. It's heartening to see someone so grounded adapt to new surroundings." I almost choked on my drink. Then she turned toward me and said with mock warmth, "We're so happy to welcome someone who's not afraid of hard work. It'll be refreshing to have a man in the family who knows how to roll up his sleeves." Laughter followed, forced, tight, awkward. I looked at Vanessa, hoping for a glance of disapproval. Instead, she was smiling. And then Clark stood up again. He tapped his glass. "Before we end, I'd like to acknowledge someone no longer with us, Evelyn, Andrew's mother." A flicker of hope bloomed in my chest, maybe finally some decency. But what came next destroyed that hope completely. She was quite the character, Clark continued. Always had opinions, always had to be involved. Remember when she insisted on helping us even when we didn't ask? Elaine chimed in with a laugh. "Oh yes, Evelyn had a lot of enthusiasm." Clark winked. "We'll do our best to keep her spirit alive at the wedding. Let's just hope Andrew doesn't inherit her leadership style." It felt like the air had been sucked from the room. A few people laughed nervously, others looked away. My father's face darkened, my sister's jaw clenched. And Vanessa, she giggled. Dad, stop, she said as though they'd just made a joke about the weather. My mother, my rock, the woman who helped save their business, had just been reduced to a punchline. That was the moment something inside me snapped. The laughter hadn't even died down when Elaine leaned over to our table, wearing a sugary smile that barely masked her smugness. Andrew, she said sweetly, I hope you didn't take any of that the wrong way. Clark and I just wanted to add a little humor to the evening. It was all in good fun. Good fun. My chair scraped loudly as I stood up, the noise slicing through the air like a gunshot. Conversations halted. Forks paused midair. Dozens of eyes turned toward me, but I didn't care. My blood was pounding my chest tight, my jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Are you serious right now? I said, my voice low but trembling with fury as I stared at Elaine. Her smile flickered, confusion flashing across her face. Clark looked up from his scotch with a bemused expression like I was some child throwing a tantrum. Vanessa tugged at my sleeve and whispered, Andrew, stop. But I didn't. You spent the entire evening mocking my mother. I said louder now, my voice carrying through the stunned silence. The woman who helped your family when no one else would. And now you're standing here acting like it was some light-hearted joke. Clark leaned back, arms folded. Relax, Andrew, he said with a smirk. You're overreacting. It was all in the spirit of celebration. Celebration, I shot back. You called her intrusive. You mocked the way she helped you without ever asking for anything in return. You made fun of her generosity like it was something to be ashamed of. That's not a celebration, it's disrespect. I could feel every pair of eyes locked on me. My father sat rigid, his hands gripping the edge of the table. My sister looked ready to launch a tirade of her own. Meanwhile, Vanessa just stared at her plate, cheeks flushed with embarrassment. Elaine let out a breathy laugh. Andrew, don't be so sensitive. Everyone knows Evelyn had a strong personality. We were just sharing memories. Memories, I said, now shaking. She co-signed your business loan. She bought your replacement freezer when yours died. She paid Jeremy's tuition so he could graduate. She babysat your grandkids while battling cancer, and this is how you repay her. By reducing her to a punchline at a dinner that's supposed to honor our families. Clark sat upright, his tone suddenly sharper. All right, that's enough. If you can't handle a joke, maybe you're not ready for marriage. And that's when I knew this wasn't just a bad night. This was the truth revealing itself. Vanessa reached for my arm again. Can we please step outside and talk? She whispered, desperate. I pulled away. No, Vanessa, we're not sweeping this under the rug, not tonight. Elaine's eyes widened in dramatic disbelief. This is supposed to be a happy occasion. You're ruining it for everyone. I turned to her. No, Elaine, you ruined it the moment you trashed my mother's memory in front of a room full of strangers. I turned to Vanessa, and you just sat there. You didn't stop them. You laughed. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know they were going to say those things. But you laughed, I repeated. You didn't try to stop them. You let it happen. A low wave of whispers passed through the room as the guests processed what was happening. Clark stood pointing toward the door. If you're so offended, maybe you should leave. I glanced around. The people who actually mattered to me were watching. My dad, my sister, a couple of friends. And in that moment, I made the decision that would change everything. No, I said firmly, I'm not leaving. I looked directly at Clark, but this wedding, it's over. I walked out of that restaurant like a man breaking through the surface after drowning. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it echo in my ears. My father followed right behind me, a hand on my back. My sister flanked my other side, glaring over her shoulder, like she wanted to go back and finish what I'd started. A couple of my closest friends stood uncertainly near the entrance, eyes full of concern and something else respect. Outside, the air was cool and I felt it rush into my lungs like the first honest breath I'd taken in weeks. "You did the right thing," my father said softly. "Evelyn would have been proud of you." I nodded, but the truth was I didn't feel proud. I felt furious, heartbroken, exposed. And above all else, I felt unfinished. If I left it there, I knew how the story would be spun. Clark and Elaine would craft their narrative, one where I was too sensitive, too reactive. They'd make themselves out to be misunderstood, paint me as unstable. Vanessa would go along with it, or worse, use it to excuse her silence. I couldn't let that stand. This wasn't about revenge, it was about clarity, it was about truth. "I need to go back in," I said. My sister blinked. "What, why?" "I'm not letting them twist this," I said, straightening my spine. "They're not going to walk away thinking I left because I couldn't handle a joke. I'm ending it on my terms." My dad gave me a long look, then nodded. "If you're sure." "I am, but I have to do it alone." I stepped back inside to a room where murmurs still buzzed like static. Conversations quieted the second I appeared. Vanessa was still at our table, eyes puffy and red frozen like someone had hit pause on her grief. Clark and Elaine were near the bar pretending to be unaffected. I walked to the center of the room, clapped my hands once, and said clearly, "Excuse me, everyone." The room hushed instantly, even the waitstaff froze. "I know this isn't the setting you expected for this, but since everything tonight's already been put out in the open, I'm not going to pretend anymore." I turned to Vanessa. "This wedding is off." Gasps. A few hands flew to mouths. Chairs scraped against the hardwood as guests shifted uncomfortably. "I want to be very clear." I continued, "This isn't just about tonight. It's about the kind of family I was preparing to marry into. A family that mocks generosity, that belittles grief, and that thinks class is measured in dollar signs." Clark scoffed audibly. "You're throwing away a good thing over some jokes." "No," I said. "The real mistake would be marrying into a family that lacks basic human decency." Elaine, finally cracking under the weight of it all, reached out. "Andrew, we can talk tomorrow, cool off." "There's nothing to cool down," I said, calm now. "You didn't just insult me, you desecrated my mother's memory in front of a room full of people. And Vanessa, you let it happen." She opened her mouth, but I held up a hand. "I don't want apologies. I want distance, and from this point forward, that's exactly what I'm taking." I walked toward the door again, this time without hesitation. Vanessa called out softly, "Please don't do this." I looked back one last time. I already did. And then I left for real this time. The next morning, I woke up to over 80 unread messages. My phone buzzed nonstop, calls from Vanessa, texts from her relatives, even emails from Clark's law office address. The tones varied. Some were pleading, some were furious. One of Elaine's cousins had the nerve to call me emotionally unstable for walking out. Vanessa's messages were the longest. Paragraphs upon paragraphs of apologies. I didn't know they were going to say those things. I was in shock. "Please talk to me." I didn't respond. By early afternoon, there was a knock at my apartment door. I knew it would come. I stood for a long moment before opening it. And there she was, Vanessa still wearing the same cocktail dress from the night before, her hair messy, her eyes rimmed with red. She looked like someone who hadn't slept, and for the first time since I met her, she looked small. Andrew, she whispered, please, can we talk? I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Talk about what? Her voice trembled. I know you're hurt. I never meant for any of that to happen. I was scared, okay? Scared of what I asked. She hesitated, of upsetting them, of starting a fight in front of everyone. So you were afraid of rocking the boat, I said, even if it meant letting them humiliate me. Even if it meant letting them insult the woman who gave everything to your family. She looked down silent. And that's the thing, Vanessa, I continued. It's not just about what they said. It's about what you didn't do. You didn't defend me. You didn't stop them. You laughed. I didn't know what else to do, she mumbled, reaching for my arm. I stepped back. You could have said something. You could have walked out with me, but you stayed, and that tells me everything. Her face crumpled. So that's it. No, I said quietly. This is the start of me choosing better for myself. Later that week, I sat alone in my apartment sorting through some of my mom's keepsakes, letters, old jewelry, the kinds of things you don't really look at until you need a reminder of who you come from. That's when I noticed something missing from the wooden box where I kept her things, a small, heart-shaped silver locket that had belonged to my grandmother before it was passed down to my mom. Inside was a photo of her as a child, worn by time but irreplaceable. The locket was gone. Panic gripped me. I tore through every drawer, every shelf. Nothing. Only one person outside of family had been in my apartment recently, Vanessa, when she came to return the engagement ring. I texted her, "Did you take my mom's locket?" Minutes passed. Then what locket? My chest tightened. I replied, "The silver one. From the keepsake box. It's missing." And after a long pause, she finally responded, "I borrowed it. I wanted something that reminded me of you, of her. Borrowed. Without asking, without even telling me. Like my mom's legacy was just another accessory." That was the final fracture in a foundation already split beyond repair. I didn't waste time. That same evening, I drove across town to Clark and Elaine's suburban house in Newton. My hands gripped the steering wheel tighter with every turn. I wasn't going for closure. I already had that. I was going for what was mine. My mother's locket didn't belong in their house, not in the same place where her name had been dragged through the dirt. Elaine opened the door when I knocked. The sweet, practiced smile she always wore dissolved the moment she saw my face. "Andrew," she said cautiously, "is everything okay?" "I'm here for the locket," I replied, straight to the point. "Vanessa told me she left it here." She blinked. "Locket, why would she?" "Please don't play games," I said, my voice steady but cold. "Just get it." Her face tightened, and for a moment I thought she might slam the door. But then she stepped aside. Vanessa came down the stairs slowly, holding the small silver locket in her hand. Her eyes were red again, her expression a mix of guilt and desperation. "I didn't mean to upset you," she said, offering it to me. "I just wanted to feel close to you, to her." I took the locket, carefully examining it for any damage. It was intact. The tiny hinge still worked, the faded photograph still nestled inside. A part of my mother that had survived generations now returned to me. "You took something that wasn't yours," I said softly. "And you didn't even tell me. That's not love, Vanessa. That's entitlement." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I didn't think you'd notice. I was going to give it back." But you didn't, I said. You stole from me after everything else. Her face broke and she reached for my arm. Please, can't we just talk? I shook my head. There's nothing left to say. I turned and walked out. The door slammed behind me, not in anger, but with finality. In the days that followed, I blocked her number, removed her family from social media, and deleted every draft of a message I almost sent. I didn't want an apology. I didn't need one. I needed peace, and for the first time in a long while, I had it. I started running again. I reopened my mom's favorite recipe book and began cooking Sunday dinners for my dad and sister just like she used to. I reclaimed the spaces where grief had silenced me and filled them with memory on my own terms. One Sunday, I opened the same keepsake box where the locket had been taken from. This time I wasn't searching. I just wanted to sit with it. I held the locket in my hand and whispered, I did what you would have done, Mom. And I felt it, not just the weight of the silver, but of everything I had walked away from. I hadn't just canceled a wedding. I had chosen myself, my dignity, my roots. And in doing so, I finally let go not of her memory, but of everyone who never deserved to hold it.